everyone, it's Daphne from Scrap and Create, and today I'm here to start the construction of the 8.5 by 8.5 Love Notes mini album that I'll be working on, featuring Graphic 45 Love Notes paper. So I'm going to use a 12 by 12 pack of the collection, using the 12 by 12 patterns and solids. In addition to that, there will be select sheets from the 8 by 8 incorporated into the album. And then lastly, I'm building the whole thing off a bundle, so that includes chipboard, pockets, tags, and all that. So what I'm going to start with is the 8.5 by 8.5 blank mini album, and I've gone ahead and inserted my base pages. So we're going to start with adding the flaps, pockets, and interactive pieces for the album. On the inside cover, I'm going to have a waterfall, but it's going to get adhered to a piece of designer cardstock. So for right now, we're going to leave that blank. So our first flaps are going to be installed onto page 1, and there's 2 of them. They're going to be adhered to the left and right edges, and these measure 8.5 by 8, 8.5 by 8. You're going to score at 1/2 inch, and then at 4.5 inches, and it's going to get folded in half. These are going to get adhered directly to the edge, and so once they're down, they're going to open up and then open again. So these are folded in half and then scored for 1/2 inch. So again, 8.5 this way, 8.5, score at 1/2 inch, score at 4, and then this is 8 inches. It's the height of the page. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and sit down and get started getting these into the book. Sorry, my chair would not roll for me. So we're excited with the new collection. I think it's really pretty. It was, I like this one, and then I really liked Bloom from the collection as well. So I'm adhering this as close to the spine without interfering as I can. And I'm hoping, I should have dry fit this first. I'm hoping that I can get both in and that they don't overlap each other. And they don't. Oh, good. Okay. You'll see some paper clips here, and that's just my cardstock for the next set of interactive components for the next page. I think it saves me a little time if they're already in the page where they're going to go. Okay, so that flap is in. I'm putting in the second flap, and before I do, I'm going to pull out a contrast sheet so I can actually see the edge of this pocket page clearly. I'm going to stand up. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I was still in frame, and I am. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm right on the edge of the paper and that my paper is straight. It's not skewing one way or another. And it's on. Okay, it's in. It's in. So this is what this page is going to look like. Okay. These close on each other. It looks like 2 doors in the opening. And then what I'm doing is essentially the same function on the last page. So you'll see some repeats of the designs, and that's pretty typical for my construction. Okay. Got a little bit of bulk, so I'm just pressing that down. Okay, now we have 2 flaps that are going to go on page 2. I'm going to set aside page 3. And they are going to go up and down. So one's going to go from the top, and one's going to come from the bottom. And these measure 7.5 by 6 1/8. 7.5, score at 1/2 inch, by 6 1/8. And I chose 6 1/8 because I'm actually going to feature a piece of the ephemera, the 4 by 6 ephemera right here, and so I just want a nice 1/16 inch of a border around it. Okay, so these are going to go in, and I'm going to just slightly offset them so that they're not stacked directly on top of each other. So you're going to need 2 of those. They're the same size, 7.5 by 6 1/8. I'm going to actually put a clip on the bottom to keep. I haven't decided how I'm keeping these 2 this feature closed. I'm thinking about doing some twine. So right now there's nothing holding it down. So I'm just going to put a clip here real quick. Actually, this is the side that's popping up to hold it so it's flat while I install this flap. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over and start with a top-down flap. I'm going to inset this about 1/2 inch, and I'm just eyeballing it. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing coming up. I'm going to offset by about 1/2 inch away from the spine. So basically the same distance that you see here, between here and here. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom of flap. Okay, I got to remove that. And that looks about right. And you can measure it and mark it if you want, but I'm just doing about 1/2 inch. That looks like a little shy, so I'm going to move it out just a bit. All right, there we go. So the top and bottom flaps are now in, and they slightly offset each other. You can see that right here, and you'll see the same thing on the other corner. Okay, so I move the top flap in about 1/2 inch, and the bottom flap is out about 1/2 inch. Okay, and this one's fun. This is going to have a top down, and then it's also going to have a left-right flap. Or you know what, before I move on, let's go ahead and get some magnets put down here. And I walked in here without tape, so I will be right back. Okay. Okay, I'm just smoothing everything out to make sure the magnets line up. Pressing down. I'm going to work the tape down, and then of course that'll all get covered with mats later. All right, so there we go. So now we're on to page 3, and I'm going to start with, I think I'm going to start with, yeah, the top down flap. Okay, so I'm going to line up those 2 marks. I'm going to turn it over. So I've got a little tick mark here and one here. I'm just going to line those up. All right, there we go, we're in. Okay, so this is the top down, and I went ahead and matted this ephemera card because during the design process I was trying to make some decisions and I wanted to see what it looked like. The follow-on page that's a copy of the design does not have the mat on it, but I intend to put a mat on it when we get to the rest of the design pages. Okay, so now we've got a left and right flap. Did I tell you the size? I can't remember. I don't think I did. So this is 6 1/8. Excuse me, 6 1/8 by 5 1/2. 6 1/8 this way by 5 1/2. Let me double check that. Did I say that right? No, I did not. 5 1/2. Yes, I did. 6 1/8 across by 5 1/2. Score at 1/2 inch. Okay, so these flaps are actually going to be on the inside. So what I'm going to do is I want to slip it under this flap and make sure that it can close. So I can't go exactly to the top of the page or it'll interfere with this flap going over. So I'm going to fold it over and then I'm going to butt this up as close as I can before I press down. And let's see. I'm gonna make sure I can close that flap, and it looks like I can. And now I gotta just get out of my own way. Here we go. Okay, that's in. So it'll go like this and like this. I'm going to do the same thing. I'll just give you a little contrast here. So that's what's going on. I'm going to do the same thing on the reverse side. And these little flaps are 4.5 by 5. So they're 5 inches tall and they're 4.5 inches wide. We're going to score a 1/2 inch. So they'll be 4 by 5 when they're finished. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to close this flap on top before I press down my adhesive so I can make sure that all the mechanisms will close. And being careful to stay actually out of the hinge, away from the gusset. And I've done it. Okay, so here we are. So we've got a left and a right and a top. And then the last design feature is a pocket that goes on the bottom. And the pocket is 2.5 by 8, 2.5 by 8. And I'm just adhering it directly to it. It does not have any flanges. I want it to be nice and tight. So I'm not putting any flanges on it. There we go. And it's just going to marry up to the edges of the page here, the pocket page, making sure to stay clear of the hinge area. Okay. And that is the end of page 3. So page 3, my current plan is to actually have a piece of ephemera that goes into this pocket that holds these pieces in place. So there won't be any magnets adhered to the top half of this. It'll be a piece of ephemera that fits in this pocket. And I did something like this with Princess. It was very similar. Okay. Okay, page 4. Page 4, we have 2 flaps. One is 7 1/4 by 7 1/4, score at 1/2 inch. And the other one is 8 by 8, score at 1/2 inch. So both of these start square, and then they're going to wind up being a 1/2 inch shorter on one side. It doesn't matter which side you decide to score because they start square. And this is going to be the larger of the 2 flaps, the 8 by 8, which is scored at 1/2 inch. It's going to be adhered to the top, and the smaller one will be adhered to the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to turn the album around so I can see the edges. And this is the full length of the page. So it's going to go from end to end. Okay. There we go. Just like that. And then there is going to be another flap that gets adhered to the bottom, and it's centered. A little bit smaller, and it's centered. Excuse me. Oops. I grabbed a little too soon. Okay, it's in, and it goes like this. So the smaller flap is going to lay on top of the larger flap, and it is going to be held in place with magnets. So let's get a magnet on here. I'm just making sure to come off the edge of the paper enough that when I put my mat down, the magnet won't be exposed. Okay, nicely done. Okay, we're on to the next page. This is a mirror image, so I'm gonna put the larger of the two flaps on top and the smaller on the bottom. This is my center page, and as usual, they're a mirror image of each other. I think I'm actually gonna just do something a little bit different in my next album. The last few I've kind of gotten on this design kick where the inside, the middle is always a mirror of each other. I'm going to do something a little different on my next album. What? I don't know, but something different. Okay, that's it. That's my top. Here's my bottom. And just to remind you, one is 8 by 8. The other is 7 1/4 by 7 1/4. Since they're both square, you just pick a side and score 1/2 inch. The larger flap goes top down, and the smaller flap is going to go bottom up. I'm not real happy with that, so I'm going to actually nudge it over just a little. And I can because I haven't really pressed it down. It's sitting here, but I didn't press. I'm working with natural light, and I get a lot more light from the left-hand side than the right-hand side, so it's not always easy to make it equal because the light's coming from one direction. Okay, I'm happy with that. Okay, these are in now. So the larger flap goes first, then this one, we're going to add our magnets, and that is page 4 and 5. And again, we just want to stay away from the edge of the paper so that when we put our mat down, we don't expose our magnet. Okay, it's page 4 and 5. Okay, we're going to start to see the patterns repeat because we are past the middle of the book. All right, so this is where we have the top down, left, right. I'm going to go ahead and put the pocket in because it is right. And I think I'll let my glue dry. Okay, there we go. And this is 2.5 by 8, 2.5 by 8, goes the full length of the page. It actually needs to be trimmed down too. It's a little bit longer than the page, I think. I'm going to start at the spine and push out, because if I need to trim, I can come back with a pair of scissors and trim off, yeah, trim off the edge, which I will do. I thought I had dry fit that, but I guess I did not. Okay. So these two flaps are going to be the left and right, and then we need to get one top down. This is a little too small, so I will be back with another piece of paper in just a moment. In the meantime, I'm afraid to lay those down because they may not stay shut. So I'm going to pause and come back with a piece of paper. All right, I went away and I came back. I've got my new piece of paper trimmed here. So this is 6 1/8 by 5 1/2. 6 1/8 by 5 1/2. Sorry, I got a little tag there I'm trying to take off. It is 5 1/2 inches this way, and they're going to score it 1/2 inch. And it goes on the top down, and it's just going to be centered. There we go. And then the next pieces are the left and right flaps, and they're going to nestle right underneath this so that when it's closed, you won't see the left and right flaps. So the way I do that is, and I'll tell you the measurements for these are 4 1/2 by 5, 4 1/2 by 5. This is the 4 1/2 inch side, score it 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this into the score area of the top flap to make sure that it will close before I press down. And there, it's in. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Shifting it around so I can see the edge. I always want the edge that I'm gluing down to be as close to me as possible. It makes it a lot easier to make a straight edge, plus it keeps me from putting my head into the shot, which you may not care about, but if my head's in the shot, you won't see my hands. I'll be covering them up. So that's why you see me flipping my book around so much. So I'm trying to always keep my hands exposed. All right, so there we go. So that is working pretty much as designed. And as I said on the previous one, the plan is that I will have a piece of ephemera that goes right here that holds this all closed. All right. Next page. This is page 7. And we have top down and bottom up flaps, and they're slightly offset. So the plan is to have a little exposure from the base mat showing up in the corner. So I'm gonna pull this in from the edge. I have to go back and look. About a 1/2 inch. Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna do the top down first. So about a 1/2 inch away from the pocket. And then I'll do the same thing about a 1/2 inch away from the spine for the bottom up. Okay. And since I'm going to do the top first, I'm turning it around so that the edge I'm applying is closest to me. It's about a 1/2 inch. Okay, that's in. Okay, we're going to do it one more time. I need something here. I'll use a paper clip. I was going to say I need something to keep that closed. There we go. And then this is going to be adhered to the bottom, going up about a 1/2 inch away from the spine. And the measurements are 6 1/8 by 7 1/2. 6 1/8 by 7 1/2, and you'll need 2 of those. One coming from the bottom, one from the top. And I am going to apply my magnets this way, in this direction. so that the top is holding everything in place. Get my 2 magnets. And then we have one more page. It's page 8, and it's going to be the same as page 1. So it's got those 2 that look like doors, but then they open out again. So, I meant to use my bigger tape. Here it is. I like this nice wide tape. It's 1/2 inch, and it completely covers the magnet, so you don't get those rough edges coming through your designer paper. The 16 or the 3/8 is not quite wide enough. Okay. That is all in place. Okay, good, good. All right, the last page, like I said, is going to be just like page 1. These are, let's see, 8.5 by 8, 8.5 by 8. So on the 8.5 inch side, score a 1/2 inch, and then score again at 4.5 inches. So a 1/2 inch, 4.5, and it should fold on itself. And you want it to fit inside your score, so that it closes securely, because that's the way it's going to be installed. So if it doesn't, just shave a little bit off this edge so that it will close neatly, and do that before you install it. It's much easier. Okay. So I'm getting ready to apply these. One's going on the left, one's going on the right. And I am double checking to make sure they fit and don't overlap before I take the tape off, which I didn't do on the first one, and I should have. I think I did this once before, but I just want to double check that, yes. So what I'm looking for is I want these 2 pieces to come together but not overlap, and they do. Comes together very neatly. Okay. Most of the time when I'm designing this stuff, I'm designing it on a grid. So I'm looking to see the height and width on a grid, which is very precise. But of course, once you fold your book and make your album, create your pocket pages, because there's folds in it, it's not as precise. So that's why it's good to dry fit it before you actually take adhesives to it, because you might have to make some adjustments, and you want to do that before you get your adhesives exposed, or before you put 1/2 of the design element in. Okay, and this is going to be the end of page 8, and the back cover, inside cover, is going to have a waterfall feature, just like on the front inside cover. So I'm going to go back over this really quickly so you can see again what I've done. And again, I don't know how I'm keeping these doors closed just yet. But page 1, so there'll be a waterfall here. Page 1 will have these 2 flaps which open and then open again. It's just one sheet of paper, but it's folded in half. And it'll close. And then on page 2, you've got a top and a bottom flap. On page 3, you've got a top flap, a left, a right, and a pocket. Okay. Okay, we've got another bottom and top. There we go. These 2 are mirror images. There we go. Okay, here we come where we're repeating our design elements. So we've got a top, a left, and a right, and a pocket. And then we've got these 2 are offset, a top and a bottom. It's hard to see because it's all black on black, but you'll see it when the designer paper comes in. Then we've got these doors that open and open again. All right, here we go. That is the design interactive elements for the Love Notes mini album that I'm working on. So the next video will actually have me layering in the design elements, and I should have those out pretty soon. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. I love the feedback. I try to incorporate it as best I can. So thanks for leaving me notes. We do review all of them, and like I said, try to incorporate everything we can to make these videos what you guys are looking for. Thanks. Bye.